Okay, so whenever we talk about biosocial development, we will always talk about brain development. And during the early childhood stage, the brain is going to grow from what it was at the end of the 2 years, 75% of its adult weight, into about 90% of its adult weight. This increase in weight is going to be attributed mainly to the process of myelination. So, myelination is the primary reason for this increase in brain weight. Let's remember what we talked about when we discussed what a neuron is. We said a neuron, which is a nerve cell, is made up of dendrites and an axon. The dendrites is the receiving end of the message, and the axon is the sending end of the message. Myelination is basically the process of covering or coating this axon with a substance that will make it much easier and faster to transmit those nerve impulses. So, the faster the message goes, the faster the reaction. And that's why the more myelination, the better the communication between the nerve cells and, of course, between the different parts of the body. The corpus callosum, if you guys remember when we talked about brain structure, we said that the two hemispheres of the brain are connected. We have a right hemisphere and a left hemisphere, and in order for both sides of the brain to communicate, there is a band of nerve fibers that connects them called the corpus callosum. This area is going to gain a lot of myelination, and due to that myelination is the weight of the brain increase, and due to this myelination we will see better communication. Why do we need to communicate between the two sides of the brain? Well, because of the concept of lateralization. Lateralization is basically sidedness. Each and every one of you has a preferred side when we carry certain functions. You have a preferred hand, you have a preferred foot, or a preferred eye, or a preferred ear. But also, when you look at the brain, there is dominance in the sides of the brain, the left and the right side, when it comes to carrying certain functions. So, brain lateralization refers to basically the area in the brain that specializes in a particular function. Where is that area located? That is what the sidedness of the brain is going to be. So, when we look at the brain structure and we look at the left side in comparison to the left side, we will notice that the left side is mostly specialized in analytical thinking, details, looking at details. So if you were looking at a picture, you will notice the details more through your left brain, because that is the function that is located in the left brain in comparison to looking at the bigger picture. You will notice that the left brain specializes in rationality of thought, versus the right brain is more of a emotional, notices the emotional cues. The left brain is the center of language. That's why it processes verbal communication, whereas the right brain is specializing in the nonverbal cues. So if I am talking to you and you're looking at me, your left brain is going to be processing what my words mean and what I'm saying, what is that vocabulary that I'm saying. But your right brain similarly is processing something else in my language, and that is my visual cues. How is the tone of my voice? What are my facial expressions while I'm talking? So both sides of your brain are engaging at the same time in trying to understand what is being looked at or heard or seen at the same time, but there's a specific specialization, there's a task, there's a function that is located in one side, and it's more dominant in one area than the other. Of course, the most important lateralization comes from the fact that your right side is controlled by your left brain, and your left side is controlled by your right brain. So if I wanted to send a signal from my brain to my right arm to move, then the signal is going to come from the left side or the left hemisphere. And similarly, if the signal wanted to go to the left side, it would have to come from the right hemisphere. Now, there's a lot of exaggeration on the concept of people being left-brained or right-brained. There is no such thing. We know that both sides of the brain are involved in pretty much every single task, in carrying every single task. The specialization is simply saying that there is a dominance. Just like both of your hands are capable of writing, your preference, your specialization is with your right hand or with your left hand. But this doesn't mean that the function is not possible or not available from both sides of the brain. One very interesting study was done on left-handed people, which found that they tend to have a thicker corpus callosum, or the connection between their left and their right brain is much thicker than right-handed people. This one explanation can be the fact that they are left-handed in a predominantly right-handed world. We tend to do things mostly with our right hands, or design things for right-handed people, because the majority of the population is right-handed. So left-handed people tend to carry certain functions with their left hand because it's the preferred hand, let's say brushing their teeth or holding the phone or writing. But then when they have to socialize and interact with others, they might have to shake their hand, the hand of somebody else with their right hand, or they might have to use scissors that were created for right-handed people, or any of the other items that you would probably not think about if you are a right-handed person, but it comes with difficulty for a left-handed person. The last thing that I want to talk about under brain development is really a concept that will be very important for your observation paper. When you do your observation paper, you are asked to look at certain concepts pretty much come alive while you're watching children interact. And one of those concepts has to do with the development of the prefrontal cortex. So during the preschool years, we're going to see an increase in maturation of the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex, if you remember, the brain had, let me go back to the brain had the frontal lobe, right? And then we said that the most front area of the brain is the prefrontal cortex, and the prefrontal part is the last part to fully develop, well into adolescence. The prefrontal cortex is very limited in infancy, but it's going to continue to develop well into adulthood. And because of that development, we are going to have some difficulties with certain tasks that require that maturation of the prefrontal cortex. One such difficulty is impulse control. So as the child develops and mature, and as the prefrontal cortex mature, your child or your preschooler will gain better ability to control their impulses. So impulsiveness is due to the lack of prefrontal cortex development or the immaturity of the prefrontal cortex. So it's very typical to see at a circle time some children sitting and following direction and being engaged and listening to the teacher, crisscross, hands in your lap, and your mouths are closed and your ears are opened like we tell them. But then it's very possible to see other children being preoccupied with either their neighbor's body or looking at something else in the room or staring at the ceiling or fidgeting or getting up or raising their hand or blurting out some words. This is all typical to the age because the inability to postpone or deny the immediate responses to an idea or behavior is typical development of a preschooler because they're working on their impulse control. And the lack of impulse control is a result of the underdeveloped prefrontal cortex. Perseveration is the other end of the equation. Perseveration is basically when the child engages in a particular task that they see as exciting or something they like, and they get stuck literally in doing it. So they might be focused on building a tower in the block area, and then cleanup time comes and the teacher is asking them to start cleaning up, and then the child is so engaged, so stuck, so focused on what they're doing that they find it really hard for them to disengage, to stop and get out. So what ends up happening is sometimes we find children throw a tantrum or have a meltdown because of that push from the adult to get them to stop what they're doing and do something else. Perseveration is also noticed in children of autism. That is repetitive interaction with one item only and continuing to focus on one particular toy or one particular activity for long periods of time. It's also found in children with ADHD that find it very hard to let go of a particular idea or thought, and basically the balance between impulsiveness and perseveration is the ideal land that we want children to arrive at, and they only arrive at it with practice and maturation.